I went and saw Dumb Money, and it is definitely a lot better than the Expendables 4.
Completely different vibe here.
Completely
Um,
different vibe.
so Dumb Money is based off of a real life story, based off of reviews. It is essentially what happened, but they way dramatized it, very much Hollywoodized it, had to throw it like for a loop and out of the thing to make it interesting. How did you
Yes.
enjoy the movie? Did you feel like you could understand what was really going on?
So yeah, because I had a little bit of knowledge, background knowledge about what happened in real life
Well, it
back in
didn't
the
happen that
pandemic.
long ago, you guys. So it's based off of
Yeah,
like
it's
two
only
2021
yeah.
Robinhood, GameStop.
Yep.
So it really was only 2 years old. So they got this movie into production pretty quick.
And get this, this movie is based on a book about those events that it's been adapted into a
Oh,
movie. So
wow. So
there's
yeah,
it's not like they adapted the events directly, like
they
they
made this
based it on a
movie
book.
quick.
And you know what? Like to be quite honest, I think that's both a good and a bad thing. It's a
Mhm.
good thing in the sense that yes, of course, it's recent enough that a lot of people still have their, that will remember at least seeing a few headlines about it, if not like following it closely. Maybe a lot of people that go to watch this movie were part of that meme stock where they were the ones doing the retail investing through Robinhood or any
Mhm.
other app like that. And it wasn't like GameStop was the only company that got caught up in the positive upswing from this retail, this whole frenzy. AMC, for example, where we go to see a lot of these movies, they as a company were just about bankrupt during the pandemic, and they also became a meme stock. And because of that, they survived because their stock values like went up hugely
Mhm.
during the course of all this going on. But as far as this movie goes, they really they focus on the person who's Paul Dano plays this character who I'm for some random reason forgetting his name right now. The retail and the person who kind of makes this get this trend going, who has like a great social media name. It's something to do with cats. Um, um, this movie
um,
definitely is rated R though, so
wait,
like
I read it somewhere where it was like
it's
die for cats or something really dumb.
his name is Keith Gill, like in the movie.
He
But his
has two
social
different
media handle,
very funny social media handles, though.
yes. So, I mean, if you are not aware of what this movie is about, like ultimately, like we said, like GameStop's was about to go bankrupt,
Mhm.
during the pandemic, and then this person, this financial analyst at Mass Mutual at the time. So and I think he lives in the town of Brockton, Mass. And I actually worked at Mass Mutual. Fun fact in the past. So and they've got their main HQ in Springfield,
Mm.
which is pretty close to like the border with Connecticut. So like I used to drive over the Mass line and go work there. So who knows? Maybe this guy worked in the same building at some point. And I don't think and works there any longer, as you find out during the movie. But as a financial analyst, he kind of got he mentions later on during the Congress testimony that he got into the stock market during the years following the Great Recession in '09 and such. So he started to follow these stocks, and then he found out all, and of course, probably because of his day-to-day job, he found out, oh, there's this thing that a lot of big funds do. These, people who are literally just rich because they manage these big
Yeah.
funds that are worth billions of dollars, and all they try basically have rigged the stock market in favor of the big guys. And so that what it was originally meant to be is if you have some extra money and you're smart about it, investing it, and maybe you're a little lucky, you can make yourself a bit of a fortune. That's what the stock market was supposed to be when it first started like 100 years ago.
Mhm.
Now it seems like all these like big Wall Street investors, they do things like they short stocks, and basically they're betting against a company, so that they were betting for, in this case, for GameStop to fail, and their bets would have made them a shitload of money if GameStop failed. So he was like, well, it looks like this stock is undervalued. I think this is a good stock. And then, he started this huge trend, and it was through Reddit. And then, this stock just completely blew up. And so the movie focuses mostly on Keith Gill's story, his story, his family, his wife, his kid, and then his brother, which is played by Pete Davidson. And
Mm.
Pete Davidson's character is one of the highlights of this movie. Then you see a bunch of other, retail investors in various aspects, like one of them being an employee at a GameStop, which is played by, I think, Anthony Ramos plays that. America Ferrera plays a nurse who's
Yeah.
an investor through Robinhood. And so all of these people invest through Robinhood, and then it looks like they're really hurting all these, these fund managers. But then at the end, what we find out is, well, those fund managers, at least it seems like, manipulated, because one of the big funds has a huge stake in Robinhood itself. So there's a clear conflict of interest that their short bets are losing, and while the company that's causing them the hurt is Robinhood, that all
Mm-hmm.
these retail investors are investing through. So they kind of force Robinhood to basically, I think what happens in the movie is like they stop allowing people to be able to buy GameStop stock for like
Yeah,
a
so
certain amount period of
Robinhood
time,
limited the GameStop stock,
which
which they still view. I was reading some material about it. In real life, they do still view that
yeah,
as being very questionable behavior
exactly.
on Robinhood's part. Yeah.
Because then in the congressional hearings, you find out all about like how these companies were connected in the back, and how they could have used their leverage, all these capital funds to like, push Robinhood to the side, or at least stop this trend that was
Mm.
causing them a lot of pain. And then we also had the fact that they shut down the Reddit thread, that where all of this,
Happened.
this whole group
Yeah.
of people were getting together on all the updates and really pushing the trend. And in that cloud of uncertainty, when the Reddit thread was down and you couldn't buy any stock, people started selling it off. And really, the only thing that was going to let this whole trend die down was if people started selling it off, and then the price would crash for GameStop, and that would lead, for this whole trend to be over. And people who had bought the stock at $3 a share, and it was trading at $130, and basically they had made thousands of dollars off of it, in some cases millions of dollars, they were losing all of that money. And that's when you look at it, like the morality of that, like, yeah, I think the movie does a good job of explaining what a short squeeze is, which is kind of what I just talked about. It does a good job of giving you the basics of mechanics of how things played out. It definitely plays up some of the characters. Like Seth Rogen's character is kind of funny. Like he's got this like dry humor sensibility about him, where his character's not trying to be funny, but the way he behaves is like you're watching him, and it's like funny to see like him struggle
I
with
really have to give him
it's
credit because he really came onto the scene years
yeah,
ago as like the dumb like comedian. He
yeah.
he's become a pretty incredible actor. Like you have
It's
to
very
give him
subtle.
that.
A lot of what
Yeah.
he does is very subtle, and in fact, and it's not just him. Sebastian Stan plays
Yeah.
one of the co-CEOs of Robinhood. You have Nick Offerman, who plays like one of the big venture capitalists, who actually ends up being subpoenaed for the congressional hearings.
Mm,
And so they have some fantastic comedic geniuses. Like Sebastian Stan, can do
yeah.
pretty much anything. He's a very talented actor. Nick Offerman is very talented, and if you have seen Parks and Rec and you've seen Ron Swanson, then you know that he can do comedy by just being very
He's
stoic and just
the best with
so. This is one of those movies. I think when I in my head went into this, I was watching this movie, I was thinking about this documentary that I saw years ago, which was called, I think, The King of Quarters, which is basically about Donkey Kong, like the arcade game, and a
Yeah.
bunch of people who got really good at it and became like the best in the world. And it was a documentary movie. It wasn't like this dramatized story, but the way it was made, the way it was shot, the way it was edited, the kind of music that they used in it, this movie definitely has a lot more of like rated R-ness to it in terms of some of the music choices and everything. But outside of that, like it felt like it was sort of similar, because the
Mm,
subject matter, obviously arcade games and retail trading are not the same thing by any means, but the way this movie kind of felt to me, it felt like a documentary in some ways, because it wasn't like it was highly stylized. They used locations that like they're very real places, like whether it's a GameStop in a mall or the local high school a track that Keith Gill runs at, because in high school he used to be a track star. So you're watching a movie that, especially for me, I did a double feature after watching The Expendables, which is this
yeah.
like high concept, over the
Yeah.
top.
Yeah.
These like they're on a fake aircraft carrier, and Pacific Ocean heading in towards a Russian like port to like start World War III, or like they're trying to stop from starting World War III, to this felt like much more you're watching something like if you watched a big sci-fi movie and then turned on The Office. It felt
Yeah.
so. It
It
was
was a
a
good,
good palate
like,
cleanser.
fresh, yeah.
But at the end of the day, what I will say is the movie felt like, I think some of the critiques that I've seen online is like things about like the pacing of the movie. It kind of felt a
Mhm.
little uneven. It's sort of like, for the most part, the movie felt like it was just like this victory lap, kind of like hyping up. Oh my God, these guys are beating like the David versus Goliath thing, and
Mhm.
David is winning. This is fantastic. And then everything kind of like falls apart. Like you get the whole Robin Hood like shuts off the buying feature for the GameStop stock. Then you see some like testimony and all that stuff. But basically, the third act of this movie is all about the congressional hearings that went on around
Yeah.
this time, which were all done over Zoom. So they were able to use a lot of the C-SPAN footage and kind of mix it in with like the real politicians talking, like the AOC,
That's
asking the
kinda cool.
questions, but
Yeah.
then the actors playing the real people actually answering back, and they're gonna stitch it together. And then in the credits, they showed the real people and their version of the answer. So you kind of got to see, oh, this is how Paul Dano played it, and this is how the real Keith Gill sounded and what
Yeah.
he looked like during the testimony. So you do get that, but like you said, I think the critiques from a lot of the other critics on this movie are kind of, they're on point. Like this movie definitely over dramatizes for the sake of entertainment, because at the end of the day, this is a very dry story if you really just get into the nuts and bolts of it, because like
Mhm.
nobody will want to follow a story that's all about retail trading and short squeezes and Wall Street. Like it's hard enough to explain just one concept. This movie has to deal with like five major concepts in order for you to follow the story. So I think the victory here is that they were able to keep the audience attention and bring them along for the ride, so they can kind of understand the basics of what's happening, and then really ground it in the character's struggle and their emotional struggle, because ultimately the big theme of David versus Goliath is sort of evident in each of the
Yeah.
characters that follow throughout the
That's
movie and their
referenced in, like,
struggles.
almost every
Yeah,
critique I've read too.
yeah.
Shailene Woodley is in this movie too, isn't she?
She is. She plays Keith Gill's wife,
Wife?
and the mother of. I think they have like a daughter. Yeah. So she
Okay,
and
yeah.
she has like a relatively understated role. Although like I think every time she's on screen, like it's fun to see because there's great chemistry between her and Paul Dano. Like they really played like off like, hey, these people have known each other for a long time. They've been married for a while, and they felt like a real couple. Like it didn't feel like
Oh, that's cute.
Hollywood like
Yeah.
movie version of a couple. Like it felt like a real relationship. So I think like while she didn't have a ton to do, what she did have to do, she did a pretty good job with. And I
Okay.
can tell you like it's the same for a lot of the other actors
Okay,
in this movie.
well, can I ask, a lot of people are comparing it to The Big Short, which seems inevitable in a lot of ways, just based off of the subject matter. Is it a little easier to chew than The Big Short? I feel like The Big Short was like a lot to take
Yeah,
in.
it
Like I
was
feel like I
denser.
had to watch The Big Short a couple times before I was like,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what I've seen some reviews mention exactly that I think it was like Craig Gillespie, who's a director of Dumb Money. He makes this movie more accessible because the
Mhm.
concepts, like I mentioned, are pretty complicated. Like you have to really know a lot about how Wall Street works to kind of
Yeah.
understand exactly what went down in this movie. But they do a pretty good job, like I said, of making it much more accessible to the average person. You
Okay.
really
Okay.
don't
Good.
need you could walk into this movie and not know anything about the actual what happened a few years ago with GameStop and AMC and retail trading and Robinhood and all that, and you will still walk out like getting a pretty good overview of what went down,
Yeah.
who was maybe in the right. I mean, they kind of leave it up to interpretation. Who's like they don't really. This movie doesn't really have like a very driven like it's not pointing fingers at anybody. That's the good thing about this movie. That it wasn't at the end of the day saying, but although they do kind of tell you what happened after the movie's events end, like white text
Mm.
over black screen at the end of the movie for the credits roll, and you can kind of see, oh yeah, this happened, this happened, and then this happened, and blah 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 blah. But outside of that, it doesn't point fingers at like clearly the movie kind of yeah, these retails traders are sort of the David, and all these big fund managers are the Goliath. So there is a certain level of morality there. As far as comparing it to the Big Short, Big Short, I think, was more cleverly written, better dialogue. It was a movie that, yes, you if you didn't have a prior understanding of a lot of the financial concepts that they covered,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, they do reference the some of the event a couple of occasions in this movie, like the events of what caused the 2009 recession with the crash on Wall Street. They do reference that a few times and how like a lot of the same behaviors were what drove this trend to happen in the first place because
Yeah.
they were trying to fight against all of these fund managers who can like get away with making these reckless bets and then still get bailed out by the government. So
Yeah.
there is some connection in terms of like the how the real life like connection, but I definitely think from a filmmaking standpoint, if you were looking for more of a, I'm very fluent in all of how Wall Street works, and I just want to watch a movie that's not going to try to dumb it down for me, then go watch Big Short. But
Okay,
if
that's
you
good.
are like most people who probably don't study numbers on what's going on with stocks and all its short squeeze, which again I can keep bringing that up because it's probably the most important concept that they bring up in this movie. um yeah, then the dumb money is a good dumb money, speaking of which, is also a term that it's apparently what these fund managers call retail investors. They call it dumb money, as in like, the money that is being pumped in by all these people buying stocks with Robinhood. They're not like, it's not their job, day job to do this on a full-time basis. They're just doing it on the side for fun to see,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like, going to the casino almost. That's why. So it's like a derogatory term, dumb money, which the movie kind of like uses that and kind of whips it back towards the fund managers by the end of the film. So uh, yeah, but the most of the movie, it feels like a nice victory lap for the little guy, which I did enjoy watching, and I think that's the most fun part about this film. And Pete Davidson, Paul Dano, especially, they're great actors. Like as we talked about Nick Offerman, you've got some fantastic Sebastian
Mm.
Stan. There's some great actors in this, and ultimately, if you don't like the movie, go read the book.
Yeah.
And you can do a lot of research. It's based on real life events, and I bet you there may be a movie coming in the future that covers other aspects of what happened around this time, whether it was the AMC stock or maybe just in general, the large bigger picture. Because while this movie focuses specifically on the GameStop story, there was a lot more to these whole series of events that went down back a couple of years ago. So they do narrow it down quite a bit.
Mm.
So you can always dig into it further if you wanted to in your own time.